everyone. Morning. As you've heard, my name is John Mwangi. I'm a program manager at iHub. Lovely to meet you all and excited to have this community-led conversation. So I'm very short-sighted, so unfortunately the screen is not helping, but I can see I have a wide array of panelists that I will be introducing. Okay, great. So I will start with our moderator of the day. A round of applause for Pauline Mushunu. Great, and I think I'm going to return the favor and pass on the mic to Pauline to introduce our next panelist.
Good morning, everyone. I think first, the panel is going to be not moderated the traditional way. So I'm going to invite my fellow panelists, but not because I'm the moderator, but because we'll just be doing this together. So I'd like to welcome Jacqueline Imenza. Jacqueline, yeah, okay. All right, so we have Bruce Sereko. Okay. And then last but not least, Romain Diaz. I think I see you here. Welcome. Great. So for this panel, and I hope all of you can hear me from wherever. Okay, great. So it's, again, not your traditional panel, and we want to treat it a bit differently, where we want to make it interactive. And this is through a live Q&A. So you will ask questions to the panel. But then before that, I think it's good for the panel to introduce themselves, what they do, and then we can pick it up from there. We good? Awesome. All right, so I think I'll start on my left. Jacqueline.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Imenza Anyamba. It's good to see all of you again today, looking fresh. And I'm an ecosystem builder, working at the intersection of development finance, private capital, and I'm really passionate about Africa and crafting our own solutions. And so my work is really just looking at how best can we innovate, how can we build and power local innovation using global solutions, and I'm excited to be here today.
Hello? Yes, okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Romain Diaz. I am a general partner at a fund called Sadgana. We are an early stage climate tech fund. So basically we invest capital and quite a bit of time and a lot of love to support founders that build technology solutions for climate mitigation, climate adaptation across both Europe and Africa. We're in the finalization of the deployment of our first fund. We have 27 portfolio companies, which I'm very happy to elaborate on, and very passionate about how we can mobilize more capital towards the solutions of the big challenges of our time. Great to be here.
Great, thanks, Romain. My name is Pauline, and I've met some of you from yesterday, but I'll introduce myself again for those who don't know me. I work as a market engagement manager at GSMA and our climate tech program. I don't know how many people in the room know about GSMA, but I believe majority do. Maybe I can see by a show of hands. Awesome. So GSMA is an association of mobile operators, but anytime we start with that introduction, most people wonder, but what are you doing in the room? What's the relationship between the mobile operators and climate? Besides being a membership organization, we also run a foundation called Mobile for Development, and this works at the intersection of the mobile technology industry as well as the development world. So our work is mainly in low and middle income countries, and we run multiple programs which are supposed to support us use connectivity for good for the communities or the people, and good for the planet. So the Climate Tech program, which is one of the programs under the foundation, leverages technology to unlock the power of accelerating climate adaptation and resilience for vulnerable groups, as well as also accelerate climate mitigation. And we all know that climate is a big monster or a huge monster that we're all trying to solve with the various solutions. So we try to see how we can leverage digital innovation to address these challenges that are suffered by these vulnerable groups, or those who didn't pollute in the first place. So we have presence in Africa, in Asia as well, and we also run an innovation fund where we provide grants to startups, again, supporting the technology solutions that they're building. And the whole aim is to see what can we do to provide opportunities or initiatives that address these problems that are faced by the planet and also by the people. We have an office here in Nairobi. Maybe some of you have applied for some of the grants we provide. But beyond the grants, we also do many other things such as insights, research. We provide resources on various topics. And we also provide a lot of advocacy support and the support for creating an enabling environment. So we do so many things, but that's just a nutshell in terms of the Climate Tech program. Thank you.
Good morning once more. Good morning, guys. It's very early in the morning. So I'm John Wangi, as previously mentioned. I'm a program manager at iHelp. Essentially what I do at iHelp is design and implement acceleration programs, bootcamps, workshops, events, just various interventions to support entrepreneurs. So iHelp is one of the pioneering innovation enablers, both in Kenya and across the continent. We go by CC Hub, also a pioneer in the space, in the Nigeria space. Essentially, we consider ourselves an innovation enabler as opposed to a hub or an accelerator or an incubator, just based on the work that we've done in the ecosystem over the last couple of 13 years. And one of our focus areas is within the green tech or the climate tech space, on top of education, health as well. So within the green tech space, this is something that has, over the couple of years, become something that we are very interested in, just looking at the trend and, just the startups that we're working with. Quite recently, working with UNDP for the Timbuktu program, being able to bring in entrepreneurs across the continent who are working in the energy, waste, and also the climate smart and agri space. So I'm excited to share more about that and the work that we're doing across the continent. In Nigeria, we've been working with UNIDO, looking at the clean tech space and supporting entrepreneurs for the last couple of years. I think actually it's we're doing on our third cohort. It's the last 3 years, just going deep into that area, which is why it's now becoming a priority areas for us to invest in as well as support. And part of us seeing ourselves as an innovation enabler is because we play across the various stakeholder groups. So looking at the startup level, doing the various programs to support them, engaging with government, and also just going all the way to university, working with academia, helping students who are doing research in this place, and actually creating pipeline that they would now create products that would essentially become businesses that now become our clients and become the startups that we accelerate. And also just looking at government and how to help the various institutions, because everyone is talking about climate, but then what is really happening on the ground, and just being able to be that player that is bringing all these people together. And it's exciting that today we're talking about community and the different stakeholders that come together to enable this space. So excited to share more about that, and also just to hear your views as well on the topic. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's give a big hand to our panel. Like as introduced, it's going to be a very different setup of a conversation where instead of the panel is giving their scripted conversation to us and we just have to take it in, we are leading with the questions where, because quite interestingly, we are represented by an incubator accelerator, we have a corporate venture builder, we have a VC, we have also a venture builder in the climate space. And I'm sure we represent different actors from startups. Let me maybe find out the different actors. The startups and founders in climate, okay? Policy in climate, DFI, okay? VC, right, okay. Ecosystem enablers. And then like me, those are still figuring out where we stand. Okay, all right, great. So let's bring in those questions and then let's direct them towards them. I would maybe set an example, I think, from the gaps that were being discussed yesterday. I think without putting it as a cliche, the issue of funding is always a challenge. And I think you represent quite an interesting mix. How can we have more coordinated funding across corporates, across VCs that will actually cascade to the startups? How can we coordinate better that whole funding channel such that the startups can actually benefit from the funding that is available? I'm not sure who wants to start with that. Okay, so I've set the tone. Please, as you get a question, I'll be moving around, and as they are deliberating on this one, just lift your hand and I'll come back to you. I'll come to you and we'll ask another question. So think of it as friends at a fireside. We are chatting, and that's the context. No script, right? So that's, I think, the first question to set the tone. I don't know who would like to start off with that one.
I can volunteer, even though I'm also being volunteered. So yesterday, listening to a lot of conversations, a lot was said around the funding gaps, but there were also positive perspectives in terms of funding being available. And so from what I've seen, and I've spent the last couple of years working in venture capital and then transitioning into the ecosystem building space. On one hand, it's a paradox, I'll say. The funding gap in Africa is a paradox, yeah? On one hand, there's lack of funding when it comes to the demand side of capital, and that's the perception. But on the other hand, there's funding that's looking for opportunities, but they can't find the right investable ventures to invest in. And so perhaps the question here is, how do we find a bridge? And what I'll say is, perhaps what we are really missing is those kind of bridges. Like, for example, issues around, funding being available, but as an entrepreneur, if you're not exposed to certain ecosystems, if you're not exposed or networked in certain spaces, then you will not get, you will not really know what opportunities await. The other thing that has also received a lot of debate and talk and attention, and we talk about it day and night, is the issue around local capital and availability and the role that they play in the ecosystem. So what I've seen happening, and I'll say this is more now at an ecosystem building level, I think it's a lot of fragmented efforts, in the sense that if you were, for example, to come to Kenya and say you want to mobilize local capital, you'll find certain efforts being led by individual groups, but they are very country specific. Yet when you look at climate innovation and climate funding landscape and even the scaling angle for businesses, it's a continental market. Yet when these efforts are really just segmented into country-specific efforts, it doesn't bear much fruit. And I'll give an example of, let's say, if you want to get a pension fund to consider investments into climate businesses in Kenya, and look at it or approach it from, we'll tell you about the opportunities that exist in Kenya. I think that alone is not enough. And perhaps what we need to do more of as ecosystem builders, as people in this space, is to look at how can we move from mobilizing local capital at a country level and do it at a continental level. The South African pension fund industry, for example, is very active. There's a lot of money flowing, but where are they really putting that money? How open are they to, let's say, consider opportunities in Nigeria, opportunities in Kenya? What are the co-investment opportunities across the continent? And then look at solutions being tailored based on that narrative. As opposed to designing solutions from the top and then going down. Let's look at what is really needed at a country-specific level, but at the back of it, remember that we need the regional or the continental integration, and so maybe direct efforts into consolidating efforts from country-specific to regional level, and perhaps at that point, if you don't get a Kenyan local capital having appetite for climate or ventures generally that are considered high risk, you then have a fallback plan, which is perhaps Nigeria or South Africa.
Okay. Thank you so much for a great context setting. Another maybe data point which I think is quite telling is that the UN and a number of agencies are pinning the amount of climate funding gap to 2.5 trillion until 2030 for the whole decade. So that's about 250 billion per year that needs to be invested in climate in Africa. And about 10% of that is actually flowing to the continent. So about 25, 30 billion per year. And basically, that is across all the capital stack. So that means sometimes we hear of the missing middle in the funding. I don't really believe in that. I think there's no real such thing as missing middle. I think we miss funding everywhere, basically at all stages of developments, from ground funding, catalytic capital, to early stage incubator venture studios, to early stage VC, to growth, to infrastructure, blended capital, basically everywhere. And that requires a level of obviously binding of the ecosystem and collaboration between all type of actors. And a few points have been made earlier that are very relevant. We need both international capital and local capital, and a lot more willingness to change the lens through which we analyze opportunities, because we need to look at software, we need to look at hardware, and we need to take more risks to go early into catalyzing these ventures to flow a lot more capital and to show that climate is not only a big challenge, but also a big opportunity. And for that, we need to have success stories to show that it's not just about doing good, but it's also about doing well from a financial perspective. Otherwise, we'll never see the missing 230 billion or so that we miss every year to flow to the continent for climate finance.
Okay. So just before moving to the next question, I see there was a hand here. So Jackie, you've just basically mentioned that to address the finance challenge, maybe a more coordinated regional approach where we are aware of regionally what is available, not only country specific. And Roman, you are really doubling down on that to say, let it be showcased, to actually say, okay, this is what is available. Maybe another question, maybe not pulling immediately on that thread in terms of practicalizing it. We need to start thinking on how, how such that it doesn't remain as a high level, but we look into how. I do have a question. Please do introduce yourself quickly, your name, and go ahead and shoot your question.
Sure, thanks. I'm Bart, working for PowerUp. We're an electric clean cooking company. And what I'd like to ask is how can we monetize secondary benefits in the climate space? In our example, electric clean cooking, it's quite easy, well, not easy, but we can model the carbon effects, we can make a carbon model and monetize that. But there's so many secondary benefits that we drive with a change towards clean cooking, air pollution, deforestation, hours spent cooking, etc. I'm sure that's the case in other sectors of carbon projects as well. How would we be able to monetize those secondary benefits as well?
I think I can go first, and I'll point back to a recent workshop we held where we were speaking about core benefits and these benefits that are sometimes secondary to the solutions that we are building in climate innovation. And one component that we believe is going to be a game changer is the DMRV aspect, in longer terms, digital monitoring, reporting, and verification. And by this, we mean, for example, if you're providing a clean cooking solution and some of the benefits to the users or the beneficiaries is the fact that they will not have to deal with smoke or respiratory diseases anymore, or they have to, if it's for the girls who are going to school, they now have time to go to school and they don't have to miss school. So how do you measure that? And how do you present that to an investor or to someone who can provide you with capital? So one initiative that we were able to conclude, and I've seen some players in the industry doing, is they've come up with a methodology, not the methodology to the standard of what you'd have maybe from Vera or Gold Standard or those huge standards, but just a way to monitor these things without having to make assumptions or assume that this person was facing this respiratory disease, and now because they no longer use firewood, this is the outcome. Or this is how much time they have saved by not going to be fetching firewood, or this is the amount of firewood they have saved, or those attributes that come from using these solutions. So DMRV and monitoring this is a huge component, and when you think about maybe how you measure that using digital tools, it could be through low technology solutions. It doesn't have to be, for example, what you would think of as sophisticated IoT sensors on the devices, or for example, how do you monitor someone is sick or someone is not? And this is part of like research and development that needs to be done to quantify that impact, because as long as you can quantify and show the tangible outcomes and this traceability, then definitely that can show credibility, and that's one way that we are trying to see how impact investors can come on board. But that's one of the initiatives at GSMA that we are trying to push through, especially the adoption of DMRV, and to measure those benefits or core benefits that are usually difficult to measure. So I think DMRV is a huge point, or use of digital technology to measure, report, and verify is one of those tools that I think will help us get there.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Apologies for being late. I had a bit of trouble getting in. My name is Bruce Insarekolule. I'm a general partner at SeedStars Africa Ventures. We're a venture capital fund, Pan-African, sector agnostic, looking to invest in businesses that are going to serve Africa's next billion. Thank you very much for the question. With regards to secondary and tertiary benefits that are derived from a business that you are running, I think there is value in tracking those details, especially from the investor's perspective. A lot of investors on the continent raise money from European development institutions, European high net worth, so on and so forth, and they have a very big climate agenda. And given this, they are interested in these benefits that are, for the whole ecosystem and so on. So even moving from just CO2 benefits and selling carbon credits and so on, there is interest with regards to deforestation, as you mentioned, so on and so forth. So I think it's valuable to note those metrics, because even us as investors, or direct venture capital funds investing in the companies directly, when we're raising capital, they want to see these kind of impact that our portfolio companies are bringing. Therefore, you make yourselves very attractive by tracking that information. So, per se, you're not monetizing it, but at least you can derive equity investment, grant investment from noting these benefits.
Great. I've got a question. Yes. Thank you for the responses. There you go. Introduce your name and the question.
Hi, my name is Mary. I'm from Octavia Carbon. We are direct air capture technology developer. So when we're talking about climate innovation, I believe one of the gaps that we are battling with and are trying to fill is inclusion. So what's your understanding on a truly inclusive climate innovation? What does that look like to you?
Joe, you want to take that? I think that is down your alley.
Yes, thank you for that. I think for us, when we look at inclusion, we look at the different metrics. Number one is looking at marginalized communities and how they're affected by this. I mean, it's well known that the climate agenda, the people who are most affected are the ones who are contributing the least. So how do we ensure that they're considered in this process? And also just looking at the innovators who are working to, create these solutions, are they considerate and are they thinking of these things from the word go as they're creating these solutions? And if they're not, we come in as an intermediary to now, direct them in that direction. And also in our selection process, in terms of the teams and the products that we're supporting, that's one key thing, because inclusion is not something that's going to happen on its own. It has to happen by design. We have to be intentional about it in terms of how we're selecting entrepreneurs at investment level, at support level, and even as we're supporting them, it's an ongoing conversation, like, how are you looking at inclusion with your solution? How are you looking at your downstream effect in terms of impact to the community around you and the people you're working with? Even looking at your team, because you find a team that is diverse is definitely going to be thinking at their customer in a different way compared to a team that is not diverse in how they're in their approach and also in just their makeup. So I think that's one way to look at it in terms of inclusivity. Where does the impact end up? And it's not just, someone actually mentioned impact tracking and it's stuck in my head till today, where you just do the pictures and, you call it a day. You have to really just follow through with the data, because then, as mentioned by my panelists, the data that, if you look at the different sectors, I think founders are the ones who have the most data compared to anyone else, because you guys are on the ground every day, you're talking to your customers and you're also going to the field. And one thing that we realize is that a lot of that data is not well structured and brought up to the people who are making the decisions, the people who are doing the investing. So you're actually playing a critical role by keeping that data and disseminating that data, and also not having a collaborative way to share that data, such that, yes, there's data that you don't want to share for your business, but then there's data that affects the ecosystem, and it makes sense for you to disseminate that, because even your investor might not know such things, and they're the ones who are giving you money. So I think there's many ways to look at inclusivity, but those are some of the ways that we have seen in our practice. Yeah.
Yeah, Bruce.
Hello? Yeah, maybe just to add on to that, when we're looking at inclusion, we're looking at how many stakeholders does this business impact positively outside its direct consumer. So, for example, we're invested in an agrovet network called Shamba Pride, and they provide high quality inputs for farmers. We are effectively enabling them to provide good inputs for these farmers. These farmers are producing quality, fruits, vegetables, produce, so on and so forth. That then also goes on to the consumers that they sell the product to, having healthy food and so on. So when we're looking at inclusion, we're looking at, okay, fine, yes, we are helping this consumer, but then who else does it effectively impact positively? So yeah, I think when you're looking at impact, you really want to try and understand the full benefit to the environment, the ecosystem, and so on.
Just a quick one, just to add on that, to
Sure.
also commend Octavia Carbon for all the work they're doing on inclusivity, because they raised quite a bit of capital from both local and international investors, clients from a bit all over the world, and creating many jobs on the ground. So big shout out to the Octavia Carbon team as well for inclusion.
Big shout out to you. Awesome.
I also wanted to add a little bit to what my colleagues are saying. And one thing, maybe a different angle to the points they have raised, is around the unconnected, the people who do not have access to internet, either because where they live there is no connectivity, or they do not have an internet-enabled phone, because most of the solutions that probably we're building require us to have a phone for us to be able to access these services. So, I mean, also a shout out to all those who are working towards handset affordability. I think it's one enabler to people to be included into these solutions, as well as, I mean, the industry where connectivity is also a huge topic, where we talk about how do we connect the unconnected, how do we provide them with the infrastructure, because it's not a one-man job to provide connectivity to everyone. It's also not a one-man job to provide them with devices or solutions or opportunities to be able to access these services. So I just also wanted to add that inclusion also covers those who are unconnected and those who are missing out just because they do not have access to all these services.
So as we steer, I see the conversation is really warming up. But my MC is reminding me I have a cutoff of 10:50. So we've brought up the topic of inclusivity, we've brought up the topic of funding and the availability of funding. We've brought up the topic of tracking impact. Now, the next two questions are very, very important, because they are going to set a closing tone to our, I don't know if I can have 5 minutes, because 3 minutes, people are, do you give me the go ahead? So in the next 5 minutes, the questions that's going to come are going to really land this ship into like a closing tone. So I do have Christine, you had your hand up.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Christine from Kenyatta University. And I'm amazed that academia is not in this space. Academia is not well represented. So I want to pose this question to the panelists. Do we appreciate that academia has a role to play in tracking information, if I may use your words? Does academia have a role to play in packaging, even disseminating information to various stakeholders, for example, the community, that can influence behavior change communication or behavior change? Can we act also as intermediaries with government, where we can be able to influence the policy and frameworks that can even help in bridging the gap in climate innovation? So it is a challenge to myself and to us all. How can we work together with academia, with the youth, with various innovators, and be part of the solutions to some of these challenges that we are saying are there, yet we are capable to help the innovators? Thank you.
So maybe I can start off with that. Yeah, I do agree. Academia has a huge role to play in this discussion. And of course, it's high time that academia is it's playing a bigger role in when it comes to innovation in whatever sector, because I believe a lot of the innovation comes from a basis of research, and that's our thesis at iHub, CC Hub. A lot of the work that we do is based off research, which is why for us, over the last couple of years, it's been very important to go back to academia and start from there, and also work with them as pipeline. On top of just looking at the research that is happening, because you'll find there's such a huge silo where there's a lot of research that is happening at academia level across different sectors, but then how do we get this data to the startups who are already working in that space? That's something we've been trying to do, where we would connect different teams of scientists who've done research with startups who we're already working with, and also just looking at startups who are already innovating in a certain space. Where can they experiment, looking at security, KPI, such organizations, because then these structures sometimes are there, but the innovators are not familiar with them. Another angle is the students themselves who are doing that research. Sometimes it's not a clear path of how I'm doing my master's or my PhD and I'm trying to get whatever I'm doing to go to a certain level because I know it's going to have impact. And I'm not familiar with the ecosystem or how to innovate and make it into a product. So I think one of the key ways is for academia to be a stakeholder in the discussion, working with the different intermediaries, looking at on the VC level, academia and VC, academia and intermediaries such as innovation enablers. One thing that we've done, for example, in ecosystems that are still coming up like Namibia, our key thing is partnerships into entering that ecosystem through academia, where we would go straight to the universities. We work with them. Because there's not a clear startup ecosystem, we would go to the students who are already innovating and are interested in becoming innovators and working with them. Also working with the institutions themselves, because then it also requires a bit of a mindset shift from the typical approach of just academia and research and that's it, to one that is more of how do we have products? How do we take these products to market? So doing a lot of trainings, a lot of work that is geared towards the lecturers, and now they're able to impart that to the students. It's one of the things that we've been doing, and just also bringing them in our research process. First, we are starting, so we have pillars or areas that we're strongly interested in. One of them is education, AI, health, and green. The green space is one that we've added in the last year, and our starting point for that was just going to do research, just looking to understand the space, looking to create information and disseminating that information, even before we go into doing much on top of what we do in terms of acceleration programs. And with that, we couldn't do that on our own, so we really had to leverage academia across the continent to be able to get this information, as well as other stakeholders. So yes, I do agree with your points. It's now looking at how do we interface more with academia. So then, because sometimes the ecosystem is a bubble. So how do we take this bubble to where academia is, or bring academia into the bubble a lot more? Because then academia sometimes does come with its own stakeholders, such as government, because you get a lot of support with whatever you're doing, so yeah.
Awesome. So maybe just to land the ship very well, I don't think I'm allowed to take another question, but let's synthesize what's been brought up. So we've raised number one. I think it links with inclusion, like what Mary mentioned, academia, and broader inclusivity of the whole ecosystem. That was one theme that came out. Another theme that came was the funding, and then another theme that came was impact tracking on the activities of the founders post-investment. Now, just to thread through as your closing remarks, you can pick either of those themes that has been brought up. I will start maybe from Bruce. Just give us like a closing nail nugget that we will carry with on either of those themes that came up on the ecosystem gaps.
Thank you. I think I'd like to dig into that point on academia. I think academia has a very big role to play in terms of developing innovative business in Africa, be it for climate, be it for all the various challenges that we have. I think as different stakeholders within the ecosystem, we need to figure out how we can leverage the knowledge that academia has to build these various businesses and solutions and innovations and so on. From my experience, what I have realized when I interact with academia, and I've heard it from multiple other parties, is sometimes, unfortunately, academia ends up working within its own bubble and not really, and then ends up developing solutions that are not per se commercializable or that can work practically. So I think there is a role for all stakeholders to work out How do we get academia into building innovation from, startups that are, starting out? Collaborations also with big existing corporates, so as to help them solve issues, so on and so forth, and develop innovation. So I think that there is a lot of room for that to develop within the continent, and I think it could be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thanks. And just to double click on that, I think what's coming out clearly is the fact that collaboration is really the currency of impact. And it's a really good point that you've raised, that academia is mostly overlooked. And beyond academia, the other group that's also rarely in such spaces where we are having these conversations, and we've just seen it right now, is policy. Yet policy is also one of the biggest challenges over and beyond everything else relating to climate innovation funding landscape. And this is because of the different standards, the fragmentation, and it takes sometimes a lot of time, and you tend to find that as a startup, when you're building, you'll have to end up spending a lot of time lobbying, which takes away time that you would have dedicated to something else. And so back to just emphasizing collaborations at an ecosystem angle, and making sure when we are having such conversations, when you're looking at challenges and opportunities, we also look at the representation of the people in the room and make sure everyone is included. And on academia, I think the other issue, or opportunity rather, is when it comes to research and development, the opportunity for academia to partner with the industry on commercialization, which is also very important, of such R&D works. And beyond that, there's also talent, and how can that be structured in such a way that we facilitate a smooth integration of young talent into the ecosystem, because talent is also one of the challenges that ecosystem faces. There's not enough of it, yet there's lots of opportunity.
I'll just close on saying that I think it's the role of any ecosystem player, whether it's investors, founders, ecosystem builders, governments, etc., to look at not only climate as a whole, but subsectors of climate, and try and look at overlooked areas. If we look at the pool of available climate funding per year, it mostly goes towards energy, quite a bit goes towards agriculture, mobility, I would say, are the three main sectors. And there's a number of overlooked areas, like anything related to water, anything related to waste management, waste to value, circular economy. So anything we can do towards building innovation and mobilizing capital towards these other areas will also help the climate ecosystem rise.
From my end, on closing remarks, and I think I'll point back to the inclusion bit, which is a key enabler, I would say. I know funding is a huge pain point across the board, and I mean, we hear that a lot, and we are always trying to see how people can build a much better story to attract funding. But on inclusion, I think what I can say is there's so many resources available on how startups can leverage these resources, such as digital literacy training toolkits to support inclusion and uplift or increase uptake or usage of these innovations that are out there. And I think sometimes there's so much fragmentation in terms of how different people are operating. Sometimes you operate in silos, or for example, academia is involved, but in isolated cases, everyone is doing different things together. So my key takeaway, or maybe my key call to action for all of us, is to join alliances, collaborate a lot. I think platforms like this are amazing, and Africa Arena is doing an amazing job to provide opportunities like this where different ecosystem stakeholders can come together. So I think it's always good for us to bring cohesiveness in what we are doing, so that we are not duplicating efforts, or someone is doing something and we are not even sure what they're doing, or how can we plug in, or how can we collaborate. So I think it's a call to action for all of us to join arms, collaborate, opportunities for partnerships when they're there. It's good for us to join alliances, groups. There are so many networks coming up, and I think it's good to be part of this because sometimes you'll go to network sessions and you'll see familiar faces, which is always encouraging, and sometimes those are the sources of opportunities that we are having in this industry. So that's my key takeaway. And I think it was a great session to interact with all of you, and I'd love to connect with some of you, especially on those who are looking into the financial inclusion bit especially, and how to increase inclusion in some of the climate innovation solutions that we are having. Thank you.
I think for me, as a closing remark or parting shot, is really just to double click on what my panelists have said. In terms of this being a problem that's larger than all of us, and it really requires the entire community or the entire stakeholders to come together to implement. And even if you look at it at a regional and continental level, one of the things you'll see is that, of course, there's some ecosystems that are getting a lot more support, a lot more funding within the climate space, and you can clearly see the impact of that in the startups and the innovations that are coming out of that space. But then you'll find this is something that is global and it's continental. Across every African country, the impacts are there, the effects are there, and there are also innovators who are working to solve for the same issues, just having a more united effort towards supporting these entrepreneurs and ensuring that they're also getting access to this funding, access to this support, in such a way that all these innovations are being able to be taken to market. And because that the effects are affecting everyone, clearly it's not going to affect one part of Africa, it's going to affect the entirety of Africa, or even the solutions that are getting a lot of support, they're able to scale into spaces where they're going to also have impact on everyone. And this requires a clear, united front on a DFI level, investment level, intermediary level, startup level, data level. It requires everyone being just hands-on on board. And I like the call to action for us to, come together and to just have a proactive approach towards it. Thank you.
Amazing. I think this first of its kind community-led type of conversation where they are not pitching to us what they are selling, but we are telling them our real concerns and they are sharing their insights to specific concerns. You've done a great job. Thank you so much. Let's give them a big round of applause.